It is now time for statements by the ministry, and I recognize the Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Thank you. COVID-19 is the greatest threat we've seen in decades. It's an invisible enemy, a deadly enemy. And the fight against this enemy is the test that will define our generation. It's the test that will define us as a people and as a province. And when they look back on this time, we will be judged on how we looked out for each other. We'll be judged on how we looked out after those most vulnerable, those who could not look after themselves. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, our enemy is ruthless. It preys on our seniors and most vulnerable, and we must protect them. We're using every tool available to us. We are deploying every resources we have. On March the 17th, I took an unprecedented step of declaring a provincial state of emergency. I did not make this decision lightly, Mr. Speaker. We looked out and looked at our best information we had available to us. We consulted with the Chief Medical Officer of Health. We debated long into the night. And we continue to do everything within our power to stop the spread and flatten the curve. We know this virus is still far from over. We are still facing a clear and present danger. As long as COVID-19 continues to spread, as long as our seniors and the most vulnerable are at risk, Ontario must remain in the position to take any and all actions necessary to fight this virus. That is why we're extending the declaration of emergency by another 28 days. We must continue to restrict social gatherings. We must continue to keep non-essential workplaces closed. We must continue to put an iron ring around our seniors, and we must continue to test the most vulnerable and those who care for them. We must continue to do everything in our power to prevent our hospitals from being overwhelmed, and the extension of the emergency order allows us to keep doing what's necessary. I want to thank all the parties present for supporting us during this critical time. Mr. Speaker, we know that people are struggling out there, and we're taking further action today to help ease the financial burden on the people of Ontario. That's why we're proud to introduce the Coronavirus Support and Protection Act. This act will provide targeted support. My colleagues will tell you more about this important bill in just a moment. Mr. Speaker, when the history books are written, it will be said that the people of this great province never surrendered to the virus. They didn't quit when the going got tough. They didn't leave anyone behind. This crisis, like many before it, has shown what we're made of. We are people who stand our ground. We rise to the occasion, and Ontario will get through this together. Ontario will emerge from this crisis stronger than ever before. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Statements by the ministry. Responses. I recognize the Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. As I rise to respond to the ministerial statement, I've got a lot of people across our great province in my heart. The public health staff and all of our healthcare workers who are protecting the elderly and caring for the sick. The first responders who help keep our communities safe and healthy. The pharmacists, grocery store staff, farmers, truckers, supply chain workers, all those involved in getting food and medicine onto our shelves and eventually onto our tables. These heroes get up and head to work every day during these dark times so that their friends, their loved ones, their neighbours, and even strangers can do their part and stay home. I think of the kids decorating the driveways, sidewalks, and windows in their homes with encouraging messages for neighbours. This morning I heard of a woman that's putting a riddle out every day on her sidewalk to cheer up her neighbours in her community. Or the teachers who are going the extra mile to make their online lessons fun and compelling for the kids by making entertaining TikTok videos for their students and scouring the internet for educational memes. I think of the businesses of all sizes that are pitching in by manufacturing masks or hand sanitizers, or by supporting healthcare workers with food or discounts. I think of the artists and performers using their art to try to help folks make it through the self-isolation. And I think of the folks who are strengthening their communities by making donations, running errands, and checking in on the most vulnerable. The people of this province are tackling this challenge with bravery and compassion. They are doing their part. And we are here today to do ours, to push for the help Ontarians need to make it through this crisis. People across the province are seeing terrifying outbreaks sweep through one long-term care home after another, as well as assisted living and group home settings. Seniors in care, vulnerable people and their loved ones are anxious about what will happen next, as more residents and healthcare workers in these facilities are diagnosed with COVID-19. All of us are filled with sorrow for those who have lost friends and family members, a sorrow that we know is only deepened because the pandemic has made it impossible for many of us to say goodbye to the loved ones we are losing in person or sometimes at all. But Ontarians are made of tough stuff, and I've been watching over this last week or so particularly as people have found new ways to celebrate. We went through a number of celebrations this past number of days, including Passover and Easter and Vaisakhi. And I listened to the radio and watched on the internet as people found new ways to show their support and love for one another. And I found it quite inspiring to see the unique ways that people reached out to be with family in a virtual way, whether it was on FaceTime or Zoom or other types of electronic opportunities. Folks didn't let the coronavirus distancing requirements stop them from getting together and rejoicing at their family and their loved ones and their friends. And I think that that's what Ontarians are made of. They are people who are going to use any opportunity to support one another, and that is what happened over the last number of days. You know, it was interesting to watch as meals were being cooked and left on porches for other neighbours or family members. It was very interesting to see how the necessity of change that the coronavirus has brought amongst us has also been the mother of invention when it comes to finding ways to connect and support each other. And for this, I was very inspired, as I said, and very moved by what's happened over the last number of days. But that's not over. We have a bit of a journey left ahead of us. I think we all realize that, and it's that spirit that we're going to have to pull up from inside of us and, you know, basically pretend we're having those same kinds of celebrations every single day now until the end of this virus. We will support each other as Ontarians. We will get through this, and I know that Queen's Park is going to have to step up to help people weather this storm, which is why we're going to pass today's legislation that the government has brought forward, and we're going to continue to be pushing for better so that folks in every community in this province have the support that they need to cope with the incredible instability that they're facing. Thanks very much, Speaker. Miigwech.
Responses? The member for Ottawa South.
Speaker, I'd like to begin by thanking everyone out on the front lines, those working in hospitals, long-term care, retirement homes, group homes, grocery stores, pharmacies, first responders, public transit, all those people out there who are taking risks every day so that we can get through this together. Speaker, it's not enough for us just to simply say thank you to all these brave men and women. Our words need to be followed by actions. These are exceptional circumstances, truly extraordinary times that require us to take extraordinary measures. And that's why we're here today, to extend these emergency measures. And there are 3 things that we must do right now to help those on the front lines. 1, all frontline workers should have the protective equipment they need to stay safe. And I'd like to, in particular, thank the Premier for all his efforts in this regard and the people of Alberta for their generosity. Still, not everyone has what they need yet. We know there is more work to do and can't do it fast enough. 2, there are thousands of PSWs, developmental service workers, youth workers, mental health workers here in Ontario, and we now understand the value of their work. These workers are amongst the lowest paid in our province, and we need to adequately compensate them. And we need to do that now because they're taking those risks right now. And 3, and importantly, not all of our frontline workers are covered by WSIB. There are people doing the same work in different settings, and they aren't covered. That's not fair. Frontline workers need to know that if they get sick, if they end up with a permanent disability, or heaven forbid lose their life because of COVID-19, that we will take care of them and their families. And we need to ensure that all frontline workers are covered by WSIB. And we have to figure out some sort of presumptive measure for COVID-19 in that. I want to thank the government and my opposition colleagues for all the work they're doing here and in their communities. It's a pleasure to work with you. We have to keep moving forward. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much. Responses, the member for Guelph.
Speaker, I'm inspired by the extraordinary way people have responded to this crisis. We've learned a lot about how we as Ontarians care for each other. And while this crisis has exposed the fragility and inequities of our social and economic systems, it has also highlighted the extraordinary things people will do to care for each other. This caring spirit should inform our plans to combat this crisis. All of us in this province face tremendous stress. Probably no one more so than the Premier. So through you, Speaker, I'd like to address the Premier directly. Premier, I know that you are working incredibly long hours dealing with unprecedented demands. And I'd like to extend that to the entire Cabinet, Speaker. I want you to know that when I respond to what people are saying to me by putting their demands on the table, it is in the spirit of cooperation and social solidarity. We're in this crisis together, and we must recover from it together. And so while I applaud the Premier for forming a Cabinet committee on economic recovery, giving us a glimmer of hope that, yes, we are going to recover from this crisis, I urge him to include an active role for the opposition. Recovery will not only require a whole-of-government approach, it will require a whole-of-society approach. And that includes the voices of the people who elected all members of this House. Speaker, there are gaps in the government's response to this crisis, and those gaps will be closed by all of us working together, giving everyone in this province, through the members of this House, a seat at the table and a voice at the table, because we were all in this together. Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the people of Ontario for the extraordinary way we have all responded to this crisis together.
Thank you very much. Motions? I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I believe you will find we have unanimous consent to move a motion without notice regarding the immediate passage of one bill, debate on a motion to extend the period of emergency in Ontario, and the adjournment of the House.
Government House Leader is seeking the unanimous consent of the House to move a motion without notice regarding the immediate passage of one bill, debate on a motion to extend the period of emergency in Ontario, and the adjournment of the House. Agreed? Agreed. Again, I'll recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I move that notwithstanding any standing order or special order of the House, that the order of second reading of Bill 189, an act to amend various acts to address the coronavirus COVID-19, may be called today, and when that order is called, 80 minutes shall be allotted to the debate on the motion for second reading of the bill, with 30 minutes allotted to the government, 30 minutes allotted to the official opposition, and 20 minutes allotted to the independent members as a group. At the end of which time the Speaker shall interrupt and put every question necessary to dispose of this stage of the bill without further debate or amendment, and at such time the bill shall be ordered for third reading, and that the order for third reading of Bill 189 shall then immediately be called, and the question shall immediately be put on the motion for third reading of the bill without debate or amendment, and that the motion to extend the period of emergency as recommended to the Speaker by the Premier in his letter dated April 10, 2020, be immediately called and moved without notice, and that the Speaker shall immediately put the question on the motion without debate or amendment, and that in the case of any division on any proceedings provided for in this motion, the division bells be limited to 5 minutes, and that the House shall continue to meet beyond the normal hour of adjournment today if necessary, and that when the House adjourns today, it shall stand adjourned until Tuesday, May the 12th, 2020 at 9 a.m.
Mr. Calandra has moved that notwithstanding any standing order or special order of the House, dispense? Dispense. Is it the pleasure of the House that the motion carry? Carried.